I'm trying to get caught up from being late with last installment. We're in 2 Timothy chapter 2. We've been talking about it's verse 21. We've been talking about what good works are. How do you decide what good work should I apply myself to? I took us back to Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. Now, let's look again at verse 21. Those who cleanse themselves from the latter will be instruments for special purposes, made holy, useful to the master, and prepared to do any good work. What makes us, first of all, useful? And secondly, prepared to do any good work? Well, two things. And I've talked about both of these things, but it's worth poking at them a little bit more. The first of that verse, those who cleanse themselves from the latter. What was the latter? That was the King James Version calls it ignoble purposes. Here, in the NIV, it's called common use. The point of it is we're talking about the vessels that are used for less than special purposes. And then he says they cleanse themselves, and there'll be instruments for special purposes. So the first thing is we make ourselves, we clean ourselves up and make ourselves available. And then the second is made holy, useful to the master. And I think that prepares us to do any good work. We don't clean ourselves up and then ask God to step in. It doesn't work that way. God, in fact, if you've ever attempted to clean yourself up, you know that what happens is the harder you try to clean yourself up, the more you realize, I can't do this. This is not working. It's like one of my favorite ways of looking at the work and grace of Jesus in my life I got from John Lynch, who he said it's like a lot of us are raised to believe that here's Jesus and here we are. And between us, there's this stack, just a huge pile of sin and unrighteousness and bad stuff. And that breaks our connection. And I think it is theologically true that sin will always get in the way of our connection to God through Christ. Well, how I was raised, the point is you put in so much effort to cut that stack down, and then this fellowship becomes unbroken again. Well, here's my experience. I worked and worked and worked to get that stack down, and thought, this is great. I feel so much better because I have this connection with Jesus. I turned around twice and the stack was back. And it wasn't just back, it was bigger than ever. It was so frustrating. But I didn't know any better. But John Lynch says, what if that's not really the picture? Now, there is this big stack of sin. You can't deny that. But what if instead of me being over here and Jesus being over here, separated by my sin, what if I'm here and Jesus is standing with his arm around me? We're both looking at the stack, and Jesus says, let's go to work on this together. Well, I think that is a more accurate biblical picture of what God is doing. And I think it pretty well describes what Paul writes about here in terms of cleansing ourselves and then being made holy. You don't separate those two. I think the only way that I can cleanse myself is by cooperating and partnering with God, with Christ, with the Holy Spirit as they cleanse me. And on the basis of that partnership, that participation with God and His Spirit and His work in my life, I then become prepared to do any good work. Last thing I want to say about this, and then we'll move on, is if you're going to do good work, you better prepare to do good work. Because when you are unprepared to do good work, you are not able to bring your best to the task. Sometimes it's not like you get a telegram from God, or nobody sends telegrams, a text message from God that says, "Oh, Steve, today at about 3 o'clock, I'm sending you an opportunity to do a good work." That doesn't happen. Or I'll just say it doesn't happen to me. Now, there may be people, probably are people out there who they might even hear directly from God about stuff like that. He did that with prophets in the Old Testament, but He hasn't done it with me. What more often happens for me is a need comes across my path, and to respond to that in the pattern that Jesus has left us, and responding to it as best I can within His nature, that's the good work. And I don't get prepared when I see the need. I get prepared so that when I see the need, I can respond. Don't react, respond. Which means the difference is a reaction requires no thought. A response requires thought. Look into, again, I'm referring back to what I said last time, look into the mirror of your life and notice what God has, how He has wired you, how He has created you, how He's put you together, where your strengths are. Prepare yourself, and this is mainly through thought. Also, it could be through study. Sometimes it's by leveraging your experience. But prepare yourself to be able to respond to the needs that present themselves. Well, you can go on two extremes. Sometimes I'm grateful I don't hear this too much, but sometimes I hear or read teaching that says, dude, all you got to do is show up. Just show up. That's all. And God will do the rest. Yes and no. Then there's the other thing. God won't give you the opportunity until you're prepared. Yes and no. It's somewhere in the middle where I show up and do what I can to intentionally prepare so that I can be available to do the most good I can. And here's the other part. There are some good works that God presented to me, and as I reflect on this, I am confident that He intended for me to respond to. I didn't feel prepared enough to do, but it's not what I feel about being prepared. It's what God knows about me being prepared. And oh, by the way, sometimes part of my preparation is being put in to situations where I feel unprepared. And a couple of things happen. One is I am cast on my need for Christ. It is undeniable and unmistakable in those moments. The second thing is I discover I think maybe I was more prepared than I thought I was. When we, in partnership with Christ, when we cleanse ourselves and are made holy, don't think of those as two separate things. In my opinion, they're merged together. And then I will be prepared to do. Look, it's not just good work. It's any good work. That's just, well, I'm going to let that maybe expand in your mind and move on. Verse 22, flee the evil desires of youth and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. That is I don't think it's a formula, but that's a pattern that can bring the greatest fulfillment and the greatest personal growth in our process of becoming more and more like Christ. Flee the evil desires of youth. You don't have to be a scholar to be able to think about what are the evil desires of youth. Well, some of the evil desires of youth, they don't involve crime. They don't involve horrible things. But here's my opinion. The number one evil desire of youth is the desire to get all I want when I want it. In psychology, that's called a lack of self-regulation, right? Self-control. One of the desires of youth that can be evil is believing that the world is supposed to make me happy and living as though that's how this is supposed to go. All right, then let's think about there are other evil desires. And one evil desire that I can look at in my own life, and as I only worked for 17 years in youth ministry, so it's not like I know everything about it, but I know quite a lot about students and teens and children. One of their evil desires is to look better than they really are. Anybody outgrow that yet? Well, or even the first one? And then probably the one that jumps into most people's mind, it did mine, is evil sexual desires. Well, there are lots of youthful evil desires. And I don't think I think he intentionally left it broad. He didn't say this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. He just said, I think he and the Holy Spirit thought, yeah, if you think about it, you'll know evil desires. What makes a desire evil? Well, the biggest thing is that it stands against God's design. And a lot of youthful desires are evil. All right, what do you do about those? Well, you flee them. That's interesting. You get away from them. One of the great biblical pictures of this is Joseph, when Potiphar's wife seduced him or attempted to seduce him. She grabbed his cloak and he squirmed his way out of his cloak and ran out of the house. That's fleeing. I know a lot of us as adults, we don't flee lusts. We try to kind of stroll away. Maybe we should think more seriously about fleeing evil desires, our youthful evil desires. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.